Welcome to Quranics. I'm Qali Tayyib, and we will talk about part 9 of Islam of the Quran to Islam of Hadith. Imam Al-Shafi'i, the true founder of traditional Sunni Islam, religion Islam. The title Al-Shafi'i compares Hadith to past messages and messengers. From the standpoint of similarity, he cites Quranic verses about God's sending of prophets and messenger. Shafi always focused on similarity because similarity is wide. It belongs to the imagination world. So it's similar to it, but it's not it. But he will never use analog because analog he has to go by compared to something that's countable, something that's physical, something is laid down. But he doesn't do that. From the standpoint of similarity, he cites Quranic verses about God's sending of prophets and messengers and compares them to the prophet's hadith. So here are verses. Example: we sent Noah to his people, and we revealed to Abraham and Ishmael, and to Ad their brother Huud, and to Thamud their brother Salih, and to Midian their brother Shuaib. And he said to Muhammad, "We have revealed to you as we revealed to Noah." This is wrong. This is a wrong analogy, and the harshness in it is deliberate with the aim of delusion and psychological confusion. The sender of prophecy is God Himself, and as for the one who is transmitting hadith and news is from human beings to human beings. And the delivered to is a prophet messenger, and in the religious tradition of all nations and cultures, they fall under the wing of infallible. That's how everybody views, the message, the revelation, the prophet as infallible, the message itself. And the fact that the transmitted prophet was one and the fact that the narration was one does not establish their oneness in credibility. It is not because the prophet is one that people believed him, and not because the news is one that is assumed based on similarity, for example, that people believe him. The prophet derives his credibility not from his singularity, but from the evidence of proof of what is known as a miracle or logic. There is no prophet sent without his proof miracle because it is his only evidence of sincerity in what he says about himself from his envoy. On the other hand, the singularity of the news hadith can only make it more doubtful than others. However, this does not mean that the frequency of the news is sufficient by itself to indicate its veracity. It is not impossible to occur mutawatir, that's a continuously recurrent hadith, even in a lie. Add to that the narration, whether the subject is single or continuous, is compelled to submit to the law of time of distance, to the law of time distance. All of them are with intervals. He said and said, and he said and said, and she said and he said, and the messenger said. And none of them, the messenger said first, and the one who lied the most about the messenger is Abu Huraira. So the topic of the research is not the credibility of the messenger, not even the credibility of the companion. Rather, it is all about those who narrated from them or forged on their tongues from the third or fourth generations, tens of thousands of hadith. It is suffice to mention that Ibn Dawood compiled his sunnah out of 500,000 hadiths, and that Ahmad bin Hanbal classified his musnad out of 700,000 hadith. So that we realize that the greatest process of forgery and falsehood of hadith against the messenger and the companion is the one organized by the forgers of hadith in the second centuries and the third Hijri, which continued in chapters in the following centuries, even after the hadith codification was settled in the books described in the Sahih. So, as we see, even though the Shafi'i, this so-called Sunnah was started in the second century and continued on. It was started in the second, but did not solidify until almost the 600 or 700 century Hijri, because it took that many hundreds of years and to accumulate the laws and to purify it, even though it's garbage, but you had to purify it also. So if all these people wrote those books, and these scholars' books are, they don't have more than 5,000 to 7,000 hadith, but they took them out of 500 to 7,000 hadith. So where did these so-called revelations go? Where did they come from? And how were they on the tongues of people? How do people memorize them? Almost 700,000 hadith. That means it was all talk. It's all about he. So in this case, instead of talking about trust, or he heard from trust, he's supposed to talk about logic, thinking, compare it to the Quran, but he never does that. His whole idea is based on trust, what he thinks, and what's fit for his time. Because in the Quran, there's nothing about woman being half, let's say, for example. But in the Arabic tradition and culture, it's there. So he would accept any hadith that supports his vision to subdue women. And there's a lot of things that is just, when compared to the Quran, it was just blown out of the waters. So we see that I should do a couple episodes about the people who forge hadith, and we're gonna recite their names and almost the hadith types and everything, so you get a bigger picture. The amount of chaos and corruption that was widely spread back then, and even though these hadith sayers, hadith collectors, or that codified the hadith, they did one good thing, that they limited the hadith. That's good, but still, when they wrote their books, even though it contained between 5 and 7,000 or 4,000, 2/3 of them were garbage. They were not fit to be in line with the Quran. So maybe the truthful hadiths out there is probably less than 1%, maybe less than 0.5%. That's it compared to the Quran. Yeah. So I am Qadi Tayyib. This is Quran Nation, and thank you for watching part 9. Part 10 is coming up, and we'll see you again.